ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to The Mood with Three Chicks and a Dude. Today we are in the mood to talk about school funding for public K-12 schools in the state of Texas. I'm your host, Josh.
I'm Katelyn.
I'm Dezi. I'm DyKeyah.
All right, yeah. Well, schools get most of their funding from either three sources. We have either the federal government, the state government, and then local districts can generate money for itself. The federal government gives Texas grants and money each year, and it is up to the state to decide whether or not how they choose to use that money. In Texas, only about 16% goes to education, and then after that, most of the money has to come from local government.
Yeah, and a lot of times property taxes are like essential in the way that like public schools also get their funding. The amount that each district earns from their taxes varies depending on school population, general income of families living within the district. Schools can also do their own fundraising in order to fill financial needs that the government can't provide. We'll go in depth with that. We all researched 4 different districts, and we'll go more in depth with each one of those later. And also, we'll learn more about like Texas funding and different effects it has on each district that we talk about.
When it comes to districts creating their own revenue, each district has come up with their own creative tactics and fundraising events. In researching Lufkin, I've got a lot of insight on how each different area is funded. The sports teams are required to come up with a lot of their own budget themselves, so they do that whether they make car washes or sell candy to the fellow classmates during class. When I talked to the superintendent, Latan Goffney, she gave us a lot more insight on what the elementaries do for their funding, and one simple way that they've found to make revenue is jean day. Since the district requires uniform, the kids get really excited when they're able to wear jeans for the day. So when each student pays $1, it creates a surprising amount of revenue that they're able to put whatever they see necessary.
That's interesting. From the district I researched, they had a lot of Mood-Dezi ISD. It was a lot of like needs for the school with like the athletic department as well. You know, like they do their own fundraising well, like individually. I feel like each like department, each school does their own thing. Like the athletic department, the science department, even the fine arts department does their own fundraising in their own way.
And it's like weird because it's like opposite from my district, because I sat and talked with Superintendent Joe Oliver of Cameron ISD, and they don't really do any fundraisers for themselves because seeing is like they get help, like a lot of help from the state because like it's a really low like poor school and stuff like that. So it's like small district and all of that. So they really push for like perfect attendance to like help boost that up a lot. Like say they award people at the end of the year, but they have like less than 3 excuse of absences.
Well, in Keller ISD, it's kind of the same way that most of the funding will come from local fundraisers and events. Just because I was looking at the statistics, and for federal funding in my district, the Keller ISD, it's only 0.44% of the total revenue that the school receives. The majority of all the funding comes from either state or predominantly local funding.
When we come back, we'll talk about state funding and how it relates to population in each district.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to The Mood. After our short break, we kind of want to get a discussion about how state funding specifically and property taxes are basically the lifeblood of the education system. Even though some districts receive more than others, it still makes up a solid portion of their total revenue. Like for the Keller ISD, it's a pretty well-populated district, and with a little over 34,000 students enrolled in Keller schools, SAT and ACT scores usually showing quite a high average, and the generous funding towards these schools and donations and the amount of taxes that can go towards it allow for most of the revenue to come from state and local governments and allow for the federal government to have a substantially less amount. They don't need to give as much.
Yeah, with Lovejoy ISD, it's also a very populous ISD comparative to the students themselves. The community itself is a fairly wealthy one, therefore the property tax is a lot higher than most. Over like double the revenue that comes to the school district is from property tax rather than state funding. It's because the population of the district is over 100,000, while the population of the students in all of the schools are just 4,000. So some of the money comes from alumni and family donations as well. And they even have a plan where, like, if you don't live in the school district, you can still go to school there. You have to pay tuition, though. It's still a public school, but they have that option. Mm-hmm. So that's a way that they get money in as well. And it's just a way they can get even more funding.
All right.
Cameron ISD is like a small district with a population of about 16,000 people. It's really small. The district gets more help from the state because of this. Like, there's only like 2,600 students enrolled in school. My bad. and the district ends up with about like a 1,800, like a little over 1,800 of the ADA, which is like their average daily attendance. So they receive an allotment per daily average for this. So the district has a good stance on like their property tax. Just with that help right there.
Lufkin ISD is a relatively small district. It's only their town, which has a population of 35,000, and there's about 8,000 students enrolled in the school district. So they receive significantly less funds from the state than the other districts, like say Keller, who receives a little over $100 million from state funding, while Lufkin only receives about 30. So it's really important for them to maintain their attendance and test scores so that that funding doesn't drop even further, since that has a lot to do with how much the state decides to fund them in the first place. To make up for the rest of their budget, they rely heavily on property taxes, which even out the difference to what they need, but it doesn't put them up equal with Keller still. They're still receiving a lot more overall, even though they have a higher level of students in the system. Money received from property taxes is a lot more useful for the schools, and state funds sometimes have certain requirements attached to them that don't allow them to be spent the way that the district might choose for that. And it's really interesting to see the way the different populations and property taxes and how much they get from the state, how much each district relies on property taxes. After this break, we'll talk about the unique issues that develop in each district.
Welcome back to the Mood, and now we're going to be talking about the unique problems with their finances throughout each district. So for my district, which is Cameron, even though they do get great funds from the state and everything like that, it's not evenly distributed between the extracurricular activities. Like the majority of it goes all to the football program, just because like they consider like us a football nation just because they went to state 5 years in a row and they won 3 years in a row. So yeah, they became like a major thing. So like they got new uniforms and they got 4 monuments outside the football field now, and they also got the football field like remodeled and stuff like that, which got in the way of other people's programs and everything like that, like soccer, all that good stuff. Like they had to like go other places to practice and play games. I mean, meanwhile, like other programs like the arts, the teacher had to buy like supplies with their own money out of their own paycheck just to like help the students out. They had to like to go like to art competition, they had to use their own cars to go there instead of taking like buses and everything like that. Had to pay for like students' food with their own money, which wasn't like really fair to them.
Yeah, that's definitely not fair. Lufkin's budget's distributed evenly, but their problem is being able to find quality teachers that are willing to work for the pay grade. So they focus a lot when they're in their interview process on finding the very best candidates that they possibly can, even though they might not be getting the same level teachers that a big district with a higher salary would pay. And they really focus on their teachers because the teachers are what reflect on the test scores and the attendance of the students. If the kids don't want to go see the teacher, they're not going to go to school. So it's a big slippery slope that leads back to lower funding still if they don't have higher teachers. And the community that votes on how the salaries for the teachers are spent or whatever, they want the funds to be given to the kids, and they argue we'll give it to the kids, and they don't realize that employing better teachers is good for the kids.
That's interesting, because when I was speaking to the Chief Financial Officer, Shay Adams from Lovejoy ISD, she was giving me some even like more different issues that arise from school funding, specifically to that district. A lot of their problems are actually with like student population, like Anaya mentioned earlier how like big the district is, the population itself, like there's not even a lot of kids who go to school there, like the majority population isn't students. And so like that it also has a problem when it comes to school funding, you know, and then like dropout and attendance rates are really like high there. Like attendance, like kids don't show up that often and the kids drop out a lot, and so like it's really, so obviously the school funding goes down whenever that happens, and you know, obviously testing scores is a big issue for most schools, and usually they're pretty high, but obviously she was telling me that like every so often, a couple of years, like they tank really low and then their school funding goes down and they really have to like work really hard to like get it back up. And these are just like the majority of concerns in this district at least.
All right. Well, in order for Keller ISD to maintain such a large amount of funding from the local and state government, it requires much effort on the school's part to have experienced teachers in the classrooms, bilingual programs for students who may struggle with the language barrier, and avoiding excessive dropouts. That can be kind of an issue in the Keller area. But that's it. I mean, that concluded our research, and we came to the point that funding for individual districts does vary quite widely across the state. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. It has been a pleasure. You're tuning into The Mood with Josh,
Katelyn,
Desi,
DyKeyah.
thank you all so much. Y'all have a good night.